Hello everyone and welcome back to Middle Earth. This is Bludborn, and today we are going to continue talking about the champion, and specifically we are going to be talking about the champion's yellow spec tree, which is his AOE, or more commonly known as the Deadly Storm. This is a very popular spec for champions. It does a lot of damage, it hits a lot of targets, and it's a lot of fun. So let's just jump right into it. First thing we're going to look at is the actual tree itself. So we'll go through some of the must-haves here and kind of cover the rest of why I have this build the way I have it. Keep in mind this is a full 79-point build, and this is likely going to change in the next few weeks with update 18. So there may be a video following this one anyway. But let's jump into it. So the Deadly Storm is the one on the right, is the yellow line, the AoE line. Must have Battle Frenzy. You're getting a plus 2400 physical mastery rating buff for 12 seconds out of that, and you are getting plus 5 to Fervor if you have Ardent Rage maxed out on that as well. Might increase. Never bad to have might. I mean, just increasing your overall damage, just not a bad thing to have. I don't have it maxed because I did want to save points for other areas, but it's not bad to put a couple points in there. Blade damage, this one's obvious. Any of your blade skills are your AoE skills. Any of your strike skills are your single target skills. So if we're in an AoE spec, of course we want to buff our AoE damage. Raging Blade, everybody's favorite, also commonly known as Shing Shing. Must have, gotta have it. And then actually increasing the blade damage from Raging Blade. Broad Sweep. If you're an AoE, you want to hit as many targets as possible, so you're going to want to have Broad Sweep in there. It's going to add up to 5 more targets. Barbed Wall, that's going to give you plus 100% Blade Wall damage. Blade Wall doesn't cost or generate fervor, so it is a very good filler skill. And when you have it buffed with your trait and your legacy, it actually does pretty considerable amount of damage. Then we move into Mighty Blast. I put a point into it. Not really a huge deal. If you do max it out, it does reduce the target's cry resistance. Not a huge deal in my opinion, though. Again, Ardent Rage increases the amount of fervor that Battle Frenzy will give you. It puts you into a fervor regen state as well, of 1 fervor every second for 10 seconds, and it reduces the cooldown by 30 seconds. So that's, in my opinion, that's a must-have. And pretty much the rest of the way down is going to be a must-have. Great Cleave, plus 25% AoE skill damage for 30 seconds. Absolutely. Battle Acuity, you're actually buffing Great Cleave's damage by 25%. Absolutely. Blade of Courage. Blade skills have a chance to return health to the champion. Absolutely. It's a 20% chance, so the more targets that you have around you with all the other buffs that you've got going on, and you have a 20% chance to hit 5% of your morale back, it's a good thing. Anytime you're regenerating your own health and taking the stress off of a healer is good. Champion's Advantage. Blade skills have a chance to bypass a target's physical mitigation. So really, it's a 20% chance that the blade skills are going to bypass 15% of the target's mitigation. It's not a huge deal, but if you are talking about big numbers and you have that buff on, essentially when you're going to lose, that target's going to lose 15% of its mitigation, it's going to get hit a lot harder. Okay, and then the more the merrier. Blade skills have a 15% chance to generate 1 fervor every target hit. So with the way this is set up, you have a really good chance to be at full fervor a lot of the time, and you can just kind of unload on a target. And then currently one of my favorite skills for the champion is Fury of Blades. This skill hits really hard. It's got a cool animation, and I just enjoy it. Okay, so that's how I have the yellow set. We do have a couple things in the Berserker line and the Martial Champion. Again, the ones that I have in red line, a couple of them are must-haves. I do have Wild Swings all the way maxed out because of the plus 5% crit chance that it gives you for 10 seconds and buffing my primary fervor generation skill by 25% more damage. When you have 79 points, it's a lot easier to get Deadly Storm where you want it to be and then still add in a couple strike skills like Brutal Strikes. It's nice to have Brutal Strikes, especially if you get into a situation where you need to primarily be AoE, but there's a couple targets you just need to hit just that one and you can't use your AoE skills. It's nice to have a couple extra single strike skills in there. And then just the critical chance increase. Honestly, if you're a champion, you just need to have this one in there. It's a plus 5% melee crit chance across the board. You just got to have that one in there. Now, with the blue line, I do have Second Wind. If you've watched the other videos, you know that it's good to have that in there. If you're at 5 fervor, it's actually 1800 power if you don't have the legacy on your champion rune. If you have your champion rune on, it's actually substantially higher. But 1800 power, I can get by with that. Aggressive Exchange. This is actually something that's really nice to have. Blade Wall will actually debuff the target's damage. And so if you look, Blade Wall can hit 10 targets. So if you're running into a pile, you can hit Blade Wall and debuff the amount of damage they're doing. That's great. Likewise, we have Horn of Champions. Horn of Champions is a minus 20% damage for 10 seconds. So you can combine those, and you've actually done a little bit of help for the entire group then. Horn of Champions will hit 11 targets, Blade Wall will hit 10, so you're actually getting quite a bit of damage reduction for a little while there, which is kind of nice. Again, that is how I have the actual traits set up. I'm not going to go through the sidebar ones here. You guys can check those out. It's just the actual perks that you get from being deeper in that line. The virtues that I have are the same setup that I have for my single target. So we have Valor, Fortitude, Honor, Zeal, and Fidelity. Valor, again, is going to be for the morale and the might. Fortitude is going to be for the might and resistance. Honor is going to be for the resistance, attack mitigation, and vitality. Zeal is going to be for morale mitigation. And Fidelity is going to be for attack mitigation and vitality. So again, this build is kind of more a well-rounded one. It's not lopsided towards offense or survivability. I've got a mix of both just to kind of keep things as balanced as I can. Okay, so that's going to bring us to the gear setup. Now, again, if you've watched the video on the Berserker line, my gear setup is exactly the same with the exception of my legendary weapon and my offhand. So right now I have my two-hander equipped, which is my single target weapon. I do have some of my weapons down here in my hotbar so I can easily switch between the two. So go ahead and put those guys on. What we're going to look at is I do have, from a jewelry standpoint, I do have, where is it? There we go. The first exquisite champion set, which is going to be the necklace and the earring. That 2-set bonus will give you an additional 10% AoE skill damage. So again, your primary role as a champion is damage. If you're in AoE spec, you want to buff that as much as you can. So that's what we're going to do. The offhand sword that I use is the Greater Valorous Sword of Finesse. Pretty straightforward. It's might, vitality, finesse, mastery, and crit rating. There's probably some better swords out there, but this one actually will drop out of the Dol Guldur instances pretty easily. I've had it drop out of warg pens and out of sword halls, and I think I've had it drop out of some other instances as well. But that's the one I use. It's a pretty good one. It's pretty well rounded. But then let's go ahead and get into the essences on this guy. So if you've not watched the other videos, I'll just kind of go over this quickly. Again, I try to balance this. So I don't want to go all physical mastery or all morale. I try to get a fairly decent balance in here. So if you look on here, we have mastery and morale. We have mastery, crit, and morale. We have morale, crit, and mastery. Mastery, crit, and morale. Physical mitigation, morale, and mastery. And then a lot of physical mastery and morale. So this one is geared more towards physical mastery, but and you'll notice I'm at 62.5 on the physical mastery, but I am at crit cap. So he's leaning a little bit more towards offense, and that's okay. But all in all, it's a pretty well-rounded one for grouping. Now, as far as the legendaries go, this is my AOE weapon. Sorry, that one. It's actually even labeled AOE. So you'll notice I actually have all this stuff filled out. So rend bleed damage, that's, in my opinion, that's a must-have. Your AOE skill damage, must-have. Crit damage multiplier, must-have. And then battle frenzy, in my opinion, is must-have. The other ones that I use, Fear Nothing cooldown. I've had a little bit of grief over this one, but it does give you a plus 2400 incoming healing rating when you use Fear Nothing, and it takes the cooldown down 30 seconds, so it actually puts Fear Nothing on a 15-second cooldown. That's a pot on 15 seconds then. So where your normal dispellable pots are on a 30-second cooldown, your skill is on 15 seconds, and it adds 2 fervor. So I don't think that's a bad one to have in there. Then I have some might in there, and then our rend armor reduction. I like having all the stuff for rend, because one of the things you're going to be doing with rend is stacking it. Now the armor reduction doesn't stack, but the bleed does. So in a way it kind of does, because if you've got your armor reduction on there and your bleed is stacking, it's going to be doing more damage over time. As far as our relics go, we have a Westmint setting of endings for our Devastate Magnitude and Critical and in-combat morale regen. We have the Emerald Gem of Endurance for Vitality and Crit rating. The True Rune of the White Mountains for reducing our attack duration, some mastery, and some agility. The agility is going to give you a little bit of critical and some evade. And then our Crafted, which is going to be might, crit, and mastery. Okay, so that's how I have my AOE weapon set up. And I do have Conflict of the Eldar Days on there, which I believe that one's going to be the mastery one. Yeah, it's going to be 500 physical mastery, and that's the one that comes out of doing the reputation with Fangorn. Okay. So now I'm sure you guys want to hit some stuff. So we'll make use of this poor little dummy right here. Now, as far as any type of rotation that I go through, typically I'm going to pop Battle Frenzy first, and then I'm going to put a Rend on. The reason I do that is because if you start off with Rend, one thing, it's going to have a bleed on it. It's going to have the armor reduction, so everything after that, while Rend is applied, is going to hit harder. And that's important. You want to do as much damage as possible. So reducing any of the target's mitigations or armor or putting a bleed on them, that's just going to increase the amount of damage that you can do. So what I might actually do even with this would be kind of how I would start off a bigger fight. So we would do Battle Frenzy, Great Cleave, and Exchange. And we're going to apply our Rend. And notice that is why Fury of Blades is my favorite skill. Okay, and then once those skills are off, I'm going to be primarily using Wild Attack to get that buff back up for the increased crit. And then I'm going to be really just cycling back and forth between Fury and Raging while trying to maintain the bleed. So with the dummies resetting, you can't actually get to 5 stacks on the dummies, which is kind of annoying, but... But you can see a Ren to tier 2 is 896 every 2 seconds. So if you can kind of imagine a tier 5, and if that's stacked with a armor reduction, it's quite nice. Okay. And then, like I said, since I have my fillers in there, it's actually kind of nice to be able to do that. Having Brutal in there is a very good filler skill with its cooldown, along with Blade Wall, again, debuffing a target. Yeah. So I really... It's not much of a rotation when I play. It's probably a bad thing, but I really just kind of go off of how much fervor I have and what's the biggest skill I have available at that time. Probably not the best way to play it, but it's worked for me for a while. So again, if you're going to be going into a fight that's going to take you a little bit longer than hitting 2 skills, I would say pop Battle Frenzy, Great Cleave, and Exchange of Blows. Keep in mind, Exchange of Blows is a damage increase too. It's going to buff you nearly 20% melee damage if you have the legacies and all that stuff on there. And then it's going to reflect 50% of the damage that you take for 15 seconds. That's pretty huge. So if you're looking from a strictly damage output, these 2 buffs right here are huge. And then putting a rend on and then hitting stuff right away, you're going to be hitting pretty hard. And then you start factoring in, you know, your scrolls, tokens, other buffs from other people in your group. AOE does hit very, very hard, and it's a lot of fun. So, but I think it's great that we actually have options between AOE and single target, and they're both very, very viable again, where Redline was actually kind of fell by the wayside for a long time, and pretty much every champion was going yellow line or sprinkling in blue line here and there. So, that is going to do it for this video. Make sure to give it a thumbs up if you liked it, thumbs down if you didn't like it. Make sure to subscribe to the channel. Head on over to Twitch and follow me at twitch.tv/Bludborn. And I hope to see you all guys again soon.